Welcome back to the shop and to the channel. The last time we worked on the KNT2HL horizontal milling machine, we got the feed distribution unit installed into the knee and made sure that the saddle and knee power feeds were working as I would expect, and they do. So the next thing that we need to do is get the table on this thing. Well, before we can put the table on, we've got to finish assembling the saddle. And the first thing I'm going to put on here is this saddle slide. This captures some of the coolant that would be flowing from the table and then feeds it down through the saddle and into the coolant recovery system. I need to get the table power feed gears and the reversing mechanism installed now. I already have the trip lever shoe on the pinion for the reverse lever installed. Now I just need to fit the shift yoke in approximately the place that it needs to sit. I might need to move it just a little bit in order to get some of these other parts in. I can drop in the table drive bracket now down into the crossfeed bracket. This picks up the power coming off of the spline shaft that feeds power throughout the knee for all the power feed mechanisms. I can start now assembling the components for the table feed, starting with this gear sleeve. And this drive clutch here is internal splines that made up with the splines on the gear sleeve. With that drive clutch installed, I can then push on this retaining collar. With that clutch in there, I can now slide on from either side the table lead screw clutch gears. Now with all that together, I can lift up that feed yoke and slide this in. Next to go on are these two bearing caps. These are left and right, and they are only assembled in one direction. I would assume that when this machine was first built, these bearing caps and the bore were all done at the same time with everything installed. That way you were guaranteed a smooth linear motion on the lead screw. There's a hole drilled through this shift rod that will need to line up with another hole in the shift yoke for a pin that holds the two together. I'll get it a little bit close and then I'll tap it in with a rubber hammer and then use a punch to try to locate that hole in the yoke. This pin now needs to go through the yoke and into that hole. Unfortunately, my fat hands keep getting in the way, so not a very good camera angle for you to see this. Well, I just want to take a second here to thank all of you that are subscribing to the channel, and those have been around for a while and those that are new. It really means a lot to see the videos being appreciated. I do hope you enjoy them, and if you're not a subscriber, I would certainly hope that you'd consider hitting that subscribe button. I get a little oil in the sleeve here so I can insert the lead screw. I think it's going to be easier for me to get it in here now than wait until later. Start this by hand, just sliding it through, and then I can thread it into the nut. And rather than thread this thing in the rest of the way by hand, I might as well take advantage of the fact that the machine's working. So I can use the table feed to go ahead and feed the lead screw in the rest of the way. Of course, I'm getting splashed with oil right now. There was a piece of felt that was wrapped around the lead screw when I took this apart, and I'm just going to go ahead and put a new piece back in the same shape as it was. It was saturated in dried oil, so I'm assuming it's either some kind of a wiper or it's how the lead screw gets lubricated, because I can find no other mechanism for applying any kind of lubrication to the lead screw. I would imagine it gets some of the oil from what falls off from the dovetails, but I'll go ahead and give it a head start by just pouring some oil on it and getting the felt completely saturated. This should be good for a while, even if only a little bit of oil is dripping off of those dovetails and into this cavity. Well, I'm ready to slide the table now onto the saddle, so I will lower the knee here and get it lined up with my utility cart that the table is sitting on. With that roughly lined up and some oil on the dovetail, I can slide this table onto the saddle. And here's where I remembered that when I took this table off, this power feed lever was not on, and so it didn't get caught on those limit stops. So the easy fix here is to go ahead and remove this power feed lever, at least to a point where I can get it out of the way and get it past that limit stop. with that handle back on, I can move forward and install the table gib. Well, before I can install this gib back into the table, it's got a couple of problems that need to be addressed, not the least of which is the fact that it's currently a banana. It has other problems too, and it really should get replaced, but I don't have the means or the capability to do that, so I'm going to try to make the best of a bad situation. I was able to use my arbor press to go ahead and get the bend out of the gib, and just hinging it on my surface plate shows me that it's actually fairly decently flat. It may not be perfect, but I think it should be fine for what it's going to get used for. The bigger problem that I have with the gib is that it has a whole heck of a lot of wear in it. Yeah, you can see that it's been broken and brazed back together. That doesn't really bother me, and it doesn't affect its performance. The real problem is that it's about 12 thousandths of an inch thinner than it should be. And you wouldn't really think that 12 thousandths of an inch was all that big of a deal, but in the world of a gib, that is a mile. In order to properly adjust the gib on the table for the table to be tight enough, the gib ends up sticking out the other side of the table by 2 inches, and it really needs to be about 1 3/4 of an inch shorter than that. And although there are lots of ways to address this issue, I have chosen probably the least of the evils, and that is I'm going to use some of this shim tape. This is 4 thousandths of an inch thick, so 3 layers should give me what I need. With the surface of the gib nice and clean with some acetone, I'll go ahead and cut a few strips of this shim tape. I picked this up at McMaster Car. It was relatively inexpensive. I think it was less than $20 shipped to my door. And I can certainly appreciate that this is not the ideal way that you'd want to do this. But you have to remember, too, that this shim is going on the side of the gib that doesn't move. It is captured on the inside of the table dovetail, and it's the opposite side that slides against the saddle dovetail ways. This stuff is self-adhesive. It's got a paper backing. So I'm just trying to be careful not to get any wrinkles in the shim tape. I don't have a whole lot extra for mistakes. I'm just being really careful here with this putty knife to try to get good adhesion and to make sure, again, that there aren't any wrinkles or air bubbles that are going to create any problems. This first layer is really the most critical one, and it's really the only one that I can mess up, because once I put another layer on here, it's all coming off. I can't do one layer at a time. I could always take this layer off and start over, but I can't do that with any of the others. Now I have to cut the shim where these oil grooves are. These oil grooves accept oil that's being wicked from that reservoir in front of the saddle down to these dovetails. It's got to get through this groove and to the other side of the gib in order for it to oil the ways between the saddle and the table. I'll also use a new razor blade to trim the shim down to the edges of the gib. Once this one is done, I just need to do this 2 more times. On either end of the gib, there's these notches for the gib retaining screw to sit in, and this one on the small end is actually worn, and it's creating a bit of a ramp that is allowing the gib to slide past the screw. So I'm going to go ahead and use my Dremel here to grind that notch a little bit so that the screw will properly seat on the end of the gib and it won't let the gib ride past it. With that shim now completely adhered to the gib and everything cut the way it needs to be, I can now slide it into the space between the table and the saddle. We'll put the gib retaining screws on either end. Well, the next thing I can do is go ahead and put the table clamp in. We start by inserting this plug. We're making sure that it's oriented so that it will line up with the dovetail. And I can go ahead and thread in the clamp screw and then attach the lever. I don't want to tighten it all the way. I actually want to back it off about 1/4 of a turn. That way when I put the lever on, when I tighten the lever all the way down, it will tighten the clamp to the dovetail. Well, this video is getting kind of long, so with that, we are going to wrap this episode up. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.